What we're hearing today, certainly the Sunday Times over the weekend, is that if you give the Tory party 3 million quid, you'll be made a party treasurer and it'll be a leg up to a peerage. That can't be right, can it, Michael? Not in any which way.
No. No.
Has it been happening for a long time, my friend?
I have no idea. I've never been on the finance side of the Conservative Party.
The SLEAZE stories that we're hearing now, and I know that you have been a massive, massive advocate of anything that isn't Boris Johnson, are the stories that we're hearing worse than the SLEAZE in the 90s? And if so, why?
I think you are trying to narrow the debate. There have been a tiny minority of people in public life, and indeed in every other form of human endeavor, who abuse the responsibilities and privileges. It has gone on throughout history. It is deplorable. It is unacceptable. And we must do everything in our power to introduce standards and regulations and controls to stop it happening. But you've got one great problem, that there is in a tiny number of human beings a weakness and a sense of greed and opportunity, and they grasp these opportunities with great shame for their own personal gain. But you can't just single out one government or one party. It's gone on throughout human life.
Do you believe that Boris Johnson and his government are corrupt, Lord Heseltine?
No, I wouldn't use that word. John Major used the word politically corrupt, and I think he was right to define the word corrupt.
Why?
Well, because he was talking about the practice of politics, and he was very precise, as John always was, in his use of language, and he should be treated with the respect that deserves.
Do you believe that, I mean, there have been many instances since Boris Johnson became the leader of the Tory party. He managed to get through Brexit against a backlog of criticism and blockages in the Commons. And it would be fair to say, Michael, that a lot of people, yourself included, will never forgive Boris Johnson for that. Now, is this a good opportunity? The own goal he seems to have scored with the Owen Paterson affair. Is this a very good opportunity for all the people on the sidelines who don't like the fact that Brexit was voted through to actually have their moment with Boris Johnson?
No, it's not the right moment. Brexit is a disaster. It was always going to be a disaster, and it's going to get worse. But I think it's quite important to allow the disaster to unfold and for people to really understand the consequences. I don't think that has yet happened on the scale that it's going to happen. And one of the reasons, the obvious reason for that, is that COVID has drawn a sort of curtain over so much of what is going on. Now, fortunately, fingers crossed, COVID looks as though it's under control, and emerging is a new scene. We've got the situation in Northern Ireland, we've got a war with the French, we've got the fishermen fed up, we've got the agricultural people dismayed. Where's the good news? There is no good news, and there isn't going to be any good news. And this time next year, people will really understand the effects of inflation, tax increases, threats to their living standards, all of which have got a Brexit element attached to them.
Michael, just if you'd like to hold there 1 second, the Speaker of the House, Sir Lindsay Hoyle, has been speaking. Peter Cardwell, can you update us from the House of Commons?
Yes, he's made a statement and said, I regret to say I don't think the House has been at its best in the way it's handled the standards issue over the last week, and MPs are now starting this 3-hour debate that in terms of what the Standards Committee should do, the powers it should have, and the reforms that they think it should implement. The question, of course, is whether the Speaker, Sir Lindsay Hoyle, leaves this to the Standards Committee itself, or whether he has his own inquiry, and that remains unclear just at the moment. I wonder if I could perhaps just ask Lord Heseltine a question. I just wondered, Lord Heseltine, if you think that there's ever a way that you can stop corruption or political corruption in politics. Is that ever something that can be truly eradicated in our system, do you think?
Well, I think you may not have heard my earlier answer. Can you deliver for me the perfect human condition? can you ensure that there will not be any people, any small minority, who abuse positions of trust? And frankly, as I asked the question, I know the answer. You can't. No one has ever been able to do it throughout history. In any profession, in any walk of life, there were always that tiny number of fringe people who abuse the opportunities.
So you're saying, Lord Heseltine, that corruption is almost in all walks of life, sadly, human nature for some. What I can totally understand, and I'm sure the listeners can, that the minute a party or a government is mired in sleaze stories, it starts a slippery slope downwards. What I fail to understand is this army of spads, these army of people hanging around, all these ministers and these politicians and people, and we'll take the Tory government at this moment in time, do not seem to be able to whiff this is going to happen. They don't seem to understand that this is going to cause the problems that it is. Are people just greedy? Do they think the public don't matter? I don't understand that, Lord Heseltine. I really don't.
Well, I don't think you, frankly, can put the blame on the special advisors. They're there. It's a separate issue. I actually, if I had become Prime Minister, I would have abolished all those. I would have allowed a situation where you could have professional people with special expertise brought in. And I certainly did that in government, and it was immensely helpful. But the idea that we should have peopled Whitehall with a whole range of often very young and inexperienced people who become part of cliques.
Yeah.
They surround the ministers, and they're then in the business of boosting that particular clique, that minister's career. They talk to the journalists, and I believe that has done harm to the integrity of our system. But the second thing it has done is harm to the relationship between ministers and civil servants. I had a huge privilege of working for civil servants for many years as a minister in one capacity or another, and I came to have the highest regard for them. But you have to be able to manage the civil service. You have to. What the civil servants want, above all else, is a minister who will take decisions. In public life, in ministerial life, you never get easy decisions.
Let me jump in if I can, Michael, please. Should we ban MPs? This is central to the debate today, from having jobs outside politics, jobs.
No, that would be a disaster.
Why?
Because a huge number of people of real talent wouldn't go into politics on that basis.
What, because of the salary?
Because you're never going to pay anything like enough as a member of Parliament for what many people in Parliament could earn outside.
Yeah, but how do you expect the British electorate to listen to that? We're talking £80,000 to £100,000 a year, which is 4 times the national average. And you're sat there saying that's not enough to attract people. Actually, should it not be enough to attract people who want to do right by the country?
Well, I can tell you it won't attract people on the scale that is needed. And you mustn't look at the 80 and the average earnings. What you have to look at is what the comparative earnings would be of the sort of people you want to attract into politics.
I think it should be a cross section. Can I ask you the next question then?
Sorry, let's get this straight. If you are a barrister, and you are in the House of Commons, then you're going to get your 80,000. But a top barrister would be earning, what, 10 times that?
Well, let me get it straight then. My opinion is different to yours, Lord Heseltine. I don't think the House of Commons should be full of barristers. I think it should be full of all sorts of people from all walks of life. And I believe that £80,000 is quite a lot of money.
Okay. What about the top businessmen?
Yeah, but you're talking about the top people. What you're talking about then is only people in the House of Commons who are up there. What I'm asking you is, for example, let me try something else. If you fail in government or you get sacked or you lose a seat, you get given a peerage. That's wrong, isn't it? The whole House of Lords thing is wrong, surely.
I'm sorry, but your knowledge of what happens is very scant. Peerages are broadly for people who've served in a cabinet. broadly, not 100%, but that's more or less what it is. If you become a cabinet minister...
So if you get sacked because you're no good at your job, you get a knighthood, yeah?
No, that's a travesty of what happens. It isn't that you get sacked because you're no good at your job. It is that in the dynamics of public life, you move on. And when you
I think that we should have a government that's representative of all the people.
Sorry, are you interested in having a discussion, or are you just a
Well, I am, but you're
monologue?
telling me that we don't know anything about what we're asking, and that to me doesn't make sense.
Look, the only point of coming on a program like this is to be listened to.
Yeah,
all
absolutely.
You do is
but you haven't answered the question that I asked.
I will deal with any of the points you want on the basis that I can get my answer in before you interrupt me.
Well, you have got your answers in.
No. Every time you interrupt.
So you're telling me that the only people that get peerages are people who have done a good job in cabinet?
I never said that. I said that by and large, a reward for cabinet service is a peerage. That is true. That not the only people, but that is true. But going back to a point again which you interrupted, I do not believe you want the House of Commons filled with people who are high earners. I think what you want in the Commons is a very broad range of people, from the most talented, the most energetic, to the people who have the most wide experience of rather humdrum lives.
Am I allowed to speak now? Am I allowed to speak? You said that you thought that anybody who was a high-ranking barrister or a high-ranking businessman would earn 10 times the 80,000 that it would be given to an MP, and yet you've just said, and I quote, that you want the House of Commons to be a cross-representation of all walks of life. I would suggest, Lord Heseltine, with the greatest of respect, that 80,000 to a large section of the people listening to this programme is a hell of a lot of money. So rather than tell me I don't know anything, answer that question.
Yes, again, you see, you weren't listening to my reply.
Wow.
I went on to say that I wanted the House of Commons to be broadly representative. I wanted the high earners, but I want a very wide spread of people who are not in that category. That was my answer. So why do you then come back and completely distort the point that I clearly expounded?
Do you think Boris Johnson should have been in the Commons earlier to front up these SLEAZE allegations?
I think Boris Johnson will find it very difficult to avoid the House of Commons on these subjects. There is Prime Minister's question time once a week, which is a very grueling experience for a Prime Minister. I have no doubt that come this Wednesday, that's what it'll all be about.
Do you think that he has weakness as a man and as a Prime Minister about the standards that are necessary for that job?
I think that he has made a serious mistake in his approach to the SLEAZE inquiry. And I've explained to you exactly why I think that there are different interpretations. But I'm afraid that on the bigger scale of history, it is his disaster of Brexit that will rank high, the highest.
Two more questions. Do you think we should strip the Lords of every peer who's ever inherited or bought their title?
Well, you would have to prove they bought it. If they bought it, it shouldn't be allowed.
And finally on Brexit, listen, we'll agree to disagree. I'm very welcoming of you coming on the show, and I appreciate that despite the fact you don't think I know what I'm talking about. Can I point out that 51% of this country wanted Brexit, Lord Heseltine, and I think we should respect the electorate, but I appreciate you coming on Talk Drive. 4:33.